Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the March 15th, 2021 Clovis City Council meeting. Given the current shelter-in-place order covering the state of California and the social distancing guidelines issued by the federal, state, and local authorities, the city is implementing changes to participate in city council meetings. The council chambers will be open to the public, but we are implementing social distancing policies and will limit the number of people who may enter into the council chambers. The meeting will be webcast and accessed at the link shown. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in meetings by accessing the webcast at the link shown, providing written comment at the same website, participating by phone, or coming to the city council meeting in person. We are practicing social distancing and can only accommodate a maximum of 16 people at one time. I will call the meeting to order and ask Councilmember Buonatua to lead us in the flag salute.
Ready, salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vong. And if the clerk will call roll, please.
Councilmember Ashbeck. Here. Councilmember Flores. Here. Councilmember Buonatua. Here. Councilmember Whalen. Here. Mayor Bessinger.
Here. Now we come to the presentations and proclamations section. Item number 1, presentation of proclamation declaring March 17th, 2021 as Small Business Development Day. Vong, you have that one?
Yes. We are declaring March 17, 2021 as National Small Business Development Center Day, whereas the Valley Community SBDC continues to demonstrate hard work and commitment and serves as a nationwide leader in job creation and small business growth. And whereas the Valley Community SBDC promotes the development, growth, and success of small businesses and aspiring entrepreneurs throughout Fresno, Tulare, Madera, and Kings counties. And whereas the Valley Community SBDC works to launch, grow, transition, and innovate businesses and provides expert consulting, training, market research, access to capital, and other tools at low to no cost assistance. And whereas the Valley SBDC is a part of the Central California SBDC network, which since 2003 has assisted thousands of companies from startups to established firms, helped to create and retain over 18,000 jobs and created more than $557 million in loans and equity. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Clovis Council does hereby declare March 17, 2021 as National Small Business Development Center Day, and it is hereby signed by our mayor and with our seal.
Lori, are you accepting for the college? Please, sir.
Hello. On behalf of Clovis Community College, I want to say thank you very much for this honor. It is truly appreciated, and we are so happy to be supporting this region.
Thank you. First and foremost, it's so nice to see you in person. I'm so happy to see at least your eyeballs, so I appreciate that. Secondly, what we do is so important, as you all know, especially since the wonderful year we've been through and the years we're seeing ahead. We are on the road to recovery. We're not going to stop what we're doing, but the reason we can say we're successful is in this room right now. It's the partnership we have with the City of Clovis and your great staff. Andy's a real whip cracker, I want to tell you that right now. And I have a dream team here with Dr. Bennett, Dean Hubbard, and Stephanie Babb. We're all working together. We're not working in a vacuum. So we want to thank you for the recognition, and we hope we can live up to your service in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'd like, we can take a picture. We'll all mask up and we can do when my Irish eyes are smiling, that'll be the St. Patty's Day thing this year, wearing a mask. And the next presentation is a proclamation declaring March 18th, 2021 as Transit Worker Appreciation Day, and Lynn is our presenter. Lynn.
Folks in here. Come on down here, Amy. Come on. And your team. Come on. All the way. 6 feet apart, but it's okay. All right. There you go. You do all the work. We just sit up here. All right. This is a proclamation declaring March 18th as Transit Driver Appreciation Day. Whereas public transit enhances the Clovis way of life by improving our air quality and making our city more accessible to all. And whereas public transit drivers fill an important role in our community by getting people where they need to go, from work and school to medical appointments, social services, groceries, and more. And whereas public transit drivers frequently go above and beyond the call of duty, safely operating our transit system throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas public transit drivers exemplify the Clovis way of life by knowing their passengers, celebrating their successes, aiding in times of crisis, and greeting them every day with a friendly face. And whereas Clovis Transit provides essential services to our community at a zero fare for the benefit of all residents and visitors to the city of Clovis. And whereas the city seeks to raise the public's awareness of the awesome job of our public transit team. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the city of Clovis does hereby proclaim March 18th, 2021 as Transit Driver Appreciation Day in the city of Clovis, and encourages all citizens and visitors to acquaint themselves with public transportation and to recognize the contributions which Clovis Transit employees make every day to our health, our safety, our comfort, and the quality of life. And it is also signed by our mayor today, March 15th. And I just want to add in the awesomeness part of it, it doesn't really say awesome, I just added that because it should be in there. But I think the things that you do with the EOC and the safe transit, safe haven for kids, I just think is so important. So you all do really a lot more than even what's described in this. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much. So thanks, Amy.
Amy?
I do have some comments.
Yes, please.
I wrote them down because this is an important recognition. I'm proud to be here tonight to help recognize and honor all the employees who work at Clovis Transit. This Thursday is National Transit Driver Appreciation Day, and our bus and van drivers in Clovis have definitely earned our admiration and thanks. In ordinary times, they provide outstanding service to our community and are always willing to do what it takes to assist passengers and to help one another. In extraordinary times over this past year, they have demonstrated a commitment to service that is second to none. In the early days of the pandemic, we made the decision to keep the buses on the road because public transit is a lifeline service for many in our community. The pandemic made the simple act of going to the grocery store or a trip to the doctor's office more complicated and risky than ever. But we knew that without our bus system, some of our passengers would have no other options. So we kept the buses rolling because the service was essential, and we made the space as safe as we possibly could for everyone. During this time of constant change and stress, our transit staff remained calm, flexible, engaged, and focused on what needed to be done. They were innovative, committed, and worked with really good humor and compassion. Simply, they were the best example of what City of Clovis represents. And I'm really proud to have some representatives here with me tonight. We have Clovis Transit Supervisor Bethany Berube, Transit Management Analyst Nick Chin, along with two of our hero drivers, Veronica Ramos de Perez and Adam De La Torre. We thank you very much for all your service.
Thank you, Amy. I'll invite my colleagues to say something, but I was in a Zoom meeting earlier this week, late last week, and I was talking to a representative of the city of Fresno, and we were talking about linking fax and Clovis Transit so that we could help the kids get to college. And he was very praiseworthy of both you and your staff, and how easy you are to work with, and how you have a can-do kind of personality. And that's not the first person who's told me that. I've heard it from COG, from several sources. So you do a great job. Our staff does an amazing job. And especially now that it's free, we're hoping that kids will be able to get to college and get a job where they can afford their own transportation one day, or at the very least, have a nice house that they can take Clovis Transit back and forth from. Any other member of council want to say anything?
I do want to say, especially to our hero drivers, you are true heroes, because, you know, when some people wouldn't go to work, you guys did, and the exposure you put yourself through and your family, it's commendable. You know, we always give praise to the police and the fire, but you guys were right there in the front line, so thank you. Thank you for what you did.
And I will invite you up to take a picture if you'd like.
I do have one request of our transcribers, though. Make sure you wave at me, because I wave at all of you, and some of people look at me like, who is that old lady, why is she waving at me? So if you see me wave, just wave back and make me so happy. You probably would, but most people look at me like, why is she waving?
They're probably going to stop and say, okay.
It is probably a little alarming, but anyway, nice job, thank you all for being here.
We'll call Rhonda for you.
Like, you need help? You need help? Someone help me.
And now we come to the public comments portion of the meeting. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on any matter within the City Council's jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, or 10 minutes per topic. Anyone wishing to be placed on the agenda for a specific topic should contact the City Manager's office and submit correspondence at least 10 days before the desired date of appearance. Do we have anybody in chambers who wishes to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda? Ma'am.
Hello, good evening. My name is Ashley Chantapuong, and this here is my Nia Vang, and we're representatives with United Health Centers. I actually manage the Clovis Herndon location along with the Fresno and Bullard location, and I'm here to present that we are now offering that COVID vaccine for 18 and older with chronic conditions. So I do have a list of conditions, and I'll leave that with you today. We are still vaccinating patients 65 and older. We're also vaccinating all of the, within the guidelines of our county department. So if you have any folks who are in our first responders category, our healthcare, education, food, agriculture, please send them our way. We are having a drive-through visit at the Clovis site from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on a daily basis. So please send them on over. I do have a questionnaire form along with a registration form for you to share with the community. All they have to do is complete front and back on the same day of their arrival, bring it to our clinic in Clovis. That way we can take care of them and we'll register them after their vaccine. All right? And the next thing is, we are still continuing our COVID vaccine or COVID testing at both sites. So please, if you have any sign or symptoms, or if it's recommended for traveling purposes, please come on out to our site. I will leave our phone number available to the Clovis members. That way you can take care of all of your medical concerns with us. Please note that we actually brought in behavioral health to our Clovis and Bullard location. So I know the last time I was here back in October, we had inquiries on behavioral health, which is such an important part of our normal living, right? And so we do have 2 LCSWs available. So please send them our way, okay? And then we will soon be opening chiropractic visits at our Bullard location, and I see that Clovis should be having one soon. And we'll also open our urgent care hours in at Bullard location, and that will roughly be around May to June. I'll give you some more information once I know more. All right. Any questions for us on behalf of United Health Centers?
Thank you. If you'll give the clerk the information, we'll make sure we get it up on our webpage and our social media. Jose?
I do have one. So all this information is online, available online?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the only thing is online, it'll ask you to complete the web appointments, so that way you can receive a phone call. However, if you feel like that's taking too long, because we do have 24 to 48 hours to get a hold of you, and if you feel like you need to get a hold of us sooner than that, please do give us a call.
Is that for the testing or for the?
Both.
Can you download the form?
Not the form. This form here is just for the community members here. You know, you can pass this out. You can actually add this to your city website if you'd like. However, this is only for United Health Centers. So if I'd hate for residents to print out this page and take it out to Peachwood Medical or a different medical office. It may be convoluted for them to receive some items from that says United Health Centers logo. So that might be a little disturbing to other medical professionals.
No, but if they want to go to you,
yes,
can they download it, fill it out beforehand, and then show up with it?
It's not currently on our website, but I actually will ask. That is a great opportunity for us to share this information as well. Okay. But for in the meantime, both sites that I manage will accept these forms. It'll actually allow residents to come by sooner and faster.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Vaughn?
Ashley, I just wanted to thank you for working in December and part of January on testing. I think that was a very good partnership, especially at the height of when the community needed something in Clovis, and the numbers that went through. I came several of those Thursdays to the test centers, and your staff did an excellent job, and hopefully we also provided excellent location and services for the people, for the residents to drive through. I know it wasn't just Clovis residents, so thank you for that. And also thank you for being able to provide vaccine, especially many times people who don't have insurance don't know where to go. And thank you for being a place for people to be able to go to. So
absolutely. And when you mentioned insurance, we do accept Kaiser insurance. Due to the low supply at Kaiser, you know, they are more than welcome to come to our health centers. And we have about 25 health centers throughout the Central Valley. So please share that with your friends and family as well.
Thank you, Ashley.
All right, thank you.
Any other member of the public in council chambers wish to address council on any item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, I will close public comments in the council chambers. Do we have anybody online?
No.
And Mr. Clerk, other than we have one public comment from
Judith Segala.
Yes, Judith Segala, and we have nothing else?
Correct.
Great, thank you. I will close public comments. Regards to ordinances and resolutions, with respect to the approval of resolutions and ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, and unless there is a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading of the resolution or ordinance shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. Consent calendar. Items considered routine in nature are to be placed upon the consent calendar. They will all be considered and voted upon in one vote as one item unless a council member requests individual consideration. A council member's vote in favor of the consent calendar is considered and recorded as a separate affirmative vote in favor of each action listed. Motions in favor of adoption of the consent calendar are deemed to include a motion to waive the reading of any ordinance or resolution on the consent calendar. For adoption of ordinances, only those that have received a unanimous vote upon introduction are considered consent items. Now, in regards to item number 8, Planning and Development Services approval, final acceptance of CIP 19-10, sidewalk improvements, West Rialto and Villa. We're going to we're going to pull that and individually consider that because there was a clerical error on the agenda. So I will, does any, other than item 8, does any member of council want to have anything on the consent calendar poll? Seeing none, any member of the public in chambers wish to have any item on the consent calendar poll? Seeing none, we have anybody online?
No.
And Mr. Clerk, we received no correspondence.
Correct.
Okay. I will take a motion on items 3 through 7 and 9 through 11.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Item number 8.
Mr. Mayor, I can cover that. Before you have a revised staff report, clerical error was made after we published. If you look at the subject line where the arrow is, where it says final acceptance in the original report, it said bid award. So it was erroneously noticed. Staff is recommending City Council approve this with the changes to final acceptance in the subject line.
Any questions from any member of council?
I assume that doesn't materially change anything about the action or the notice or who might have been
correct.
interested to come.
Any member of the public wish to address the council on this item? Present in chambers, seeing none. We have anybody online?
No.
Mr. Clerk, no correspondence.
Correct.
Okay. I'll close public comment and come back to council for action.
I'll move for approval for the final acceptance for CIP 1910 sidewalk improvement.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Public hearings. A public hearing is an open consideration within a regular or special meeting of the City Council for which special notice has been given and may be required. When a public hearing is continued, noticing of the adjourned item is required as per Government Code 54955.1. Item 12, consider items associated with the establishment of objective standards for single-family development continued from the March 1st, 2021 meeting. In this item, staff is recommending that we continue this item to a date uncertain to allow further review. The City Attorney, you wanted to make a comment here, sir?
The only thing I would, just in case there is anyone wanting to make public comment, just allow for public comment. We don't need to open the public hearing necessarily, but just allow for public comment, please.
Thank you. Any member of the public in chambers wish to address the council on this item that we're pulling off of the consent, off the calendar?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Mike Brandini, representing the Building Industry Association. We support the continuance, and we would support a continuance of at least 30 days to work through the issues that were raised at the March 1st meeting of the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? Seeing none, any other member of the public in chambers wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we have anybody online?
None.
Mr. Clerk, we got any correspondence?
No.
Okay, I will close public comments and come back for a motion unless there's a discussion.
I'll make a motion that we continue both of these items dealing with the standards, objective standards for single-family residential development to a date uncertain.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Item 13, consider approval of resolution of the City Council of the City of Clovis approving the issuance and sale of lease revenue bonds by the Clovis Public Financing Authority to provide financing for Landmark Square project, generally located on the northeast corner of Clovis Avenue and 3rd, and approving related documents and official actions. Jose, did you?
Yes, I'm going to have to recuse myself. I have a financial interest in some property that is in the limits there for both 13 and 14, so I will recuse myself for both those items.
Thank you, Jose. Jay, is our presenter. Jay.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So tonight we have two items for you related to the general fund lease revenue bonds, specifically to partially fund the Landmark Square project, the senior center. So, excuse me. So the City Council and the Board of Public Financing Authority have separate resolutions tonight to authorize the sale of the lease revenue bonds. So the first item, number 13, is consideration and approval by the City Council. What this allows us to do is the city to enter into agreements with the Clovis Public Financing Authority. Upon approval of 13, number 14 is by the Board of Directors. And what this allows the city to do is enter into agreements between the city and the PFA, and then ultimately sell the bonds to the investors. Both these items have to be approved tonight in order to go through with the bond sale. So just to give a quick overview of the team, financing team, on the phone right now tonight is Chick Adams with Jones Hall. He provided all the legal counsel on the issuance of the bonds. His team also drafted all the legal documents in the preliminary official statement that is those hundreds of pages attached to the item tonight. And then our underwriter, bond underwriter is Stiefel, and basically they helped us navigate the structure of the bonds. They spearheaded the credit presentation with S&P, and then ultimately their job is to sell the bonds to the investors at the lowest possible rates. Eric is also with us tonight on the phone. Do you have any questions that I couldn't handle? So just a general overview again of Landmark Square. It consists of a 35,000 square foot senior activity center, 22,000 square foot library, and 11,000 square foot transit building. The funding for this project totals approximately $20 million, where the $4 million is coming from transit funding already in place, $2 million for the library on-site improvements, and then $14 million is being proposed for the bond proceeds tonight to pay for the project. So the Clovis Public Financing Authority is going to issue approximately $12.3 million in revenue bonds to finance the construction of the senior center at the Landmark Square project. The authority is a joint powers authority, which was set up to provide assistance with public infrastructure. The city established this authority back in 1990, and the two members of the authority are the city and the successor agency to the Clovis Community Development Agency. The 2021 bonds will be secured by certain lease payments made by the city and to the authority respect to the lease property, and then the lease property will then be leased back to the city in the form of lease payments. We did, prior or after this staff report, we did meet with S&P, and they did give us a strong AA- rating on our bonds. So just a general overview of the lease financing, which is the mechanism proposed for this project. Basically, the bonds are sold by local governments such as us to help fund public projects. They're authorized and issued by the Public Financing Authority. They are in this lease-back structure where we're issuing the bonds and then the city is making payment for those lease payments. Some of the advantages of this is a lot of other cities do this type of financing. It's very vanilla. There's nothing special about it. It's a fairly quick process for us, even though it was a lot of work. We basically from start to finish in 60 to 90 days. A disadvantage, if you want to call that, I don't necessarily call it a disadvantage, but it does compete with other general fund priorities over the years. These are debt payments that we're putting in place for 30 years, and they will compete with other general fund interests. And again, these type of bonds are common for capital projects of general community benefit, including this one. So just to give you an idea of the size of the bonds and what we're looking at, this was as of March 4th. We're basically looking at depositing $13.7 million to pay for the senior center. The bonds themselves are approximately $12.3 million. They're being 30 years, so they're going to mature in November 2050. And the interest rate on the bonds is right at 3%, give or take a little bit of a cushion. The total debt service over the life of the bonds is $21.1 million, and our average annual debt service will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $715,000 annually for the next 30 years. So the key next steps for us is tonight, hopefully approval of the financing. If that does happen, then week of the March 22nd, the bonds will go out and we will price them in the market. And then April 13th, the bonds will close and the funds will be delivered to the city for the project. So staff's recommendation is for City Council to approve the issuance and sale of the lease revenue bonds by the Clovis Public Financing Authority to provide financing for the Landmark Square project. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Bob?
Jay, when we learned that the federal government was going to be giving cities a significant amount of money, one of the things I was considering was whether it made sense for us to continue to go out to finance these projects. The total debt financing being $21 million in order to get $14 million. It seems to me like over a period of the 30 years, the citizens of the city of Clovis may be able to save a significant amount of money in the millions of dollars if these funds from the federal government could be used for a project like this. The information I'm receiving is basically just coming from the media and then also that we get from the League of California Cities. Has your department or those that we've hired in order to assist with this process given much thought to the idea of not going out and incurring this general obligation debt in favor of using some of these potential funds coming from the federal government?
There is that possibility that these funds are directed by council to be spent on a project like this one. The numbers that we're hearing are approximately potentially 18 million coming to the city of Clovis. That could be used for any number of projects, including this one. It could be used to fund loss of revenue. It could be used for a project like this one. But I would urge council to also understand that there is Fire Station 2 construction costs coming in a year, which is approximately $9 million. So the interest rates right now are competitive, and if we were going to consider paying cash for one of the projects, Fire Station 2 would also be a viable option to use some of those funds instead of incurring even more debt.
And then if I can, Andy, do you know whether there are any restrictions on the funds that are coming from the federal government to the city of Clovis that would preclude us from investing in either this Landmark Square project or the firehouse?
Capital projects are included as an eligible expense in the legislation. However, the Secretary Treasurer has some work to do regarding any further restrictions or interpretations of the law. So we'd be waiting on some of those determinations to understand the full extent of how we can use the funds.
Okay. And I wish I could predict interest rates to know whether they were going to be going up or going down. I could make a lot of money. And it's hard to know, I mean, think historically, 3%, I mean, that's really good. But it's hard to know what it's going to be in the next year. I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd probably bet that interest rates are going to be going up because of the amount of debt that we've incurred in our country. But I don't know that for sure. I just wanted, I guess my follow-up question then is, I know that we've got these timelines that are set out, and I would like to have the conversation about what to do with the $18 million before we decided to approve this financing. I just don't know when we're going to have that conversation as a council, and if it's going to be. And I guess also, I would like to know whether this is going to be an authority for up to the 12-point-something million or 14 million, I can't remember what the figure was, or if it's going to be, no, that's how much is going out to the market.
That's approximately how much is going out to the market. So when I talk about a $12.3 million par value, they intend on selling the bonds at a premium, and in layman terms, that just means that they're going to adjust the interest rate to get to approximately $13.7 million in proceeds. So the intent is to pay for the senior center with bond proceeds of approximately $14 million, which is the approximate cost of the senior center.
In order to get to the premium, aren't they going to have to go with interest rates that are a little bit above the market?
They are a little bit higher, but that true interest cost, all included, including that, is approximately 3%.
Can you say that one more time, please?
Yep. The total cost of the interest, including that, is approximately 3%. So the market itself is actually at a lower than 3%.
Okay.
But the way they structure it for investors want certain returns on their investment, so the market dictates those parameters.
Okay. Do you know when we're going to have the conversation about what to do with the $18 million?
So as soon as we get some answers from the Treasury Department and get some more specifics, we'll start we've been having some internal kind of what-if conversations already amongst staff, and paying for infrastructure projects was one of those items we talked about. We don't have all the specifics on the bill yet, so we don't want to get too far down the line in official discussions until we know what the specific restrictions are. And we also need to see what the timing is, because my understanding is the funds are not going to come all at once. They're going to be coming in two batches. And the single batch may not be enough to pay for this. If the second batch isn't going to be in time to complete the project, this would complicate things. That's why we were looking heavily at Fire Station 2 as one that we could pay cash for rather than finance, because then that saves us money, and that's already been plugged into our 5-year forecast. And we're looking at some other infrastructure projects that could have that same or possibly even better return. So we are definitely looking at that. We just don't have enough specific answers yet to be able to really have that discussion with council.
Okay.
I don't know that we're going to have those in time for this project, for the timelines. I don't know that we're going to have all the specific answers before we go out to sale with the bonds.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about that timeline then, if we can. So there are going to be, we have some funds available in order to pay for some of the construction of Landmark Square. We don't have all of the funds. And I would understand that we probably have to be making some payments on some of our contracts as we start constructing Landmark Square, and perhaps we've paid quite a bit already. But I don't know when we would be tapping into this $12 million plus in order to make sure that construction goes on the timeline that we have kind of called out for in our project management plans. Can you address that for me as to the when we'll start actually spending the 12.3 million?
I don't know exactly when. Jay, do you know what the timeline was, or Renee, do you know when we were going to run out of cash on hand and start needing to rely on these bonds? I thought it was fairly close to this bond sale agreement by the time we got the revenue.
The idea behind the funding level of this bond was to pay for the senior center with the bond proceeds. So as they build out that project that isn't transit, that is specific to the senior center, we would requisition and draw those funds back into the city as construction took place.
Okay, and so if I understood your answer correctly, what you're saying is that there are funds available in order to pay for some of Landmark Square, but those funds are going to be limited, that are available are going to be limited to the transit center, not to the senior center. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. There's no funding for the senior center. There is funding set aside for the transit through some of the grants SB1 type money, and there is money set aside for the library undergrounding with the development impact fees, but there is no money set aside for the senior center project.
Okay, and then the Fire Station 2 that we've been alluding to, that is basically a tear down and rebuild, and that's not anything that would be paid for by development impact fees, because this is a firehouse that has already been paid for through prior development impact fees. Is that right?
Correct. That's an existing replacement of existing facilities. So it's actually a two-phase project. The first is to design and build a temporary fire station at the Fire Training Center, because we have to keep that's our busiest engine company. We have to keep them in service. So the plan is to design and build a temporary quarters for them at the Fire Training Center. And then once we relocate the engine there, then we would tear down and rebuild Fire Station 2. Then once they move back into Fire Station 2, that temporary quarters would become a classroom for the training center. So it's a little bit longer process, because it's kind of a two-step process. But it would all be paid for out of general fund, because it's a replacement of an existing general fund facility.
Okay, thank you. And then Jay, I think this is my last question. Do you know what the call features are for the bonds that we plan to issue?
These bonds are structured, have a 10-year call date, so they would not be callable for a period of 10 years, and then after that, anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Lynn?
Jay, do we have other bond financing out there that we're also paying debt service on? Could you just refresh my memory on that? I know we paid off the police and fire long ago. We paid off the fire station downtown long ago.
The main debt that we have out there currently is the courtyard. So in addition to the normal public safety vehicles that we've been leasing over the last many year, the courtyard is the other largest debt that we currently have out there. It is funded predominantly by enterprise funds, but it is the most similar bond to this one.
Wastewater treatment plant, no?
Wastewater and water both have outstanding bonds quite considerably and will so, and 2040 and beyond. So those bonds are considerably larger than the bond we're talking about now.
But have a repayment mechanism built into the fee, the water fee? Yeah?
Yes.
So where we have, I mean, so we have substantial long-term debt in a couple of areas. So the water fee is that debt service, where is that coming from? The enterprise fund?
So both the water and the sewer bonds are paid for through development impact fees when those funds are sufficient to make the debt service.
Okay. So not a general fund
No, not a general
obligation?
fund. Correct.
Okay.
This would be the first general fund type debt
Okay.
like this in a long time.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Bob?
Jeannie, when we do something like this, does it affect our credit rating or our bond rating at all? Does it lower it? Does it make it harder for us to move on to the next project?
They still look to the city as the underlying bond rating of how strong we are. So when we sat down with S&P a couple weeks ago and went through our finances, they look at the city and the general fund as a whole. This particular bond would not necessarily adjust that rating on the city. At some point, if your ability to pay something like this is in question, then your bond ratings would, in theory, be lower, which would increase your cost of capital. But it is not affecting the city in a negative way to do this. They just ranked these bonds one notch lower than the general city to price them in, so they're a little bit more expensive than just a general obligation of the city. So I hope that answers your question.
So when will that potential re-rating occur?
So the bond rating agencies look at this on an annual basis and adjust as necessary. Some of their concerns this year is, PERS liability to the city and how we're handling it and what we're looking at. So we've had that thorough conversation with them on lots of finances, but the general fund is strong. The fund balance is strong. There's a lot of positives with the city that we have been proactive since the last recession, and they recognized a lot of those factors.
Okay. And we also don't anticipate that being affected for the next several years, I'm assuming.
We don't
got that projection.
We don't expect to be affected negatively in the near future due to COVID or any of the other economic factors. If there was a large recession that was around the corner that we didn't know about, we would have to plan for that. And if we adjusted accordingly like we did the last time, our bond ratings could and probably would stay approximately the same.
And then, Luke, if there are no funds coming from the feds, how will we take care of Fire Station 2 again? Will it just be another bond?
Yes, it would be another similar bonding mechanism to this. We did plug those figures into our 5-year forecast, assuming that it was going to be bonded. If we end up using federal funds and not bonding, then that's an annual savings going forward. But it would be funded very similar to this.
Okay. And those are in the next 5 years, that's the next major expenditure. If there were no federal funding coming for us, it's this one and
correct, on the general fund side. We have, again, kind of focusing on the general fund and not focusing on the enterprise funds and the developer impact fee fund. These are the two big ones that we are looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Glenn.
You're using the $18 million figure, I think. Did you start that rumor? Is that the figure that is forecast? I'm asking because the other night on the news I saw that they had cities, and the city of Madera was getting $22 million, and I thought, well, that's good. We must be getting more than that. And those might have been just not correctly reported. But is that our number?
Our number is in the 18s. It's 18 point something. And it is because it is not necessarily based purely on population. Clovis does not compete well as a disadvantaged community, so we will be getting a smaller per capita share than many of our surrounding cities.
Okay, it's good not to be disadvantaged. So I was hopeful it would be a little higher. But all right, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll open this to public comments. Any member of the public in chambers wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, do we have anybody online?
No.
Mr. Clerk, we received any correspondence?
No.
Okay. I will come back to council for a discussion or for motion.
Well, first, if I may, Mayor, first I want to congratulate staff, the community, and really this council for us being able to get the AA- rating from Standard & Poor's. That's a good rating, and it does save our citizens money in the long run. I'm presuming that we're not going to be insuring these bonds then with that rating? Okay. And because we don't have to pay insurance, and that also saves us some money as well. So the reason that we're able to get that kind of a quality rating is because of the way that we've been able to handle our finances, and I think answer the questions that S&P had related to our future finances. I am going to be a no vote on this, and the reason I'm going to be a no vote on it is because I would like to have all of the options on the table when we have the conversation related to what we're going to do with the money that's going to be coming from the feds. And I understand that that is probably going to muck up the works for those people who've worked hard on trying to get this bond out to the investors. But at the same time, it may make absolutely perfect sense not to use the 18 million or any portion thereof for this, and to use, it for instead station house number 2. But I don't know that yet, and I don't know what the other options are that we're considering as well for the $18 million. And if this one is, one that is an option for us to spend it on, to be able to save the 700 and something thousand a year by not issuing these bonds, can really have some long-term significant benefit to our community, and we would be. If the total debt financing cost is going to be $21 million over 30 years, we'll be saving our citizens even more money during that period of time, because we're only going to be getting, I guess, 12-point-something million, and we're going to be paying, close to an additional $10 million in order to get that $12 million. That's why I will be a no vote on if presuming that the motion is that we approve it. So I wanted to explain my thoughts prior to the vote. Thank you.
Then I have a question. Are you going to make a motion? Jay, is there a prepayment penalty? If we voted to do this, we get $18 million over the next 13, 14 months. Can we as a council prepay part of that into it, or are we stuck into this for 30 years?
The bonds as currently structured do not allow for a prepayment for a period of 10 years.
Okay, so for 10 years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for those comments. I think that's an important perspective. I do think that if it's sort of not this debt, it's another debt. So I'm not, I guess I don't have great confidence maybe that we'll even get the federal dollars. So anyway, all of that being said, I will make the motion approving issuance and sale of lease revenue bonds by the Clovis Public Financing Authority to provide financing for the Landmark Square project, generally located on the northeast corner of Clovis Avenue and 3rd Street, and approving related documents and official actions.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3, 1 no, 1 abstention. Now we're going to adjourn to the Clovis Public Financing Authority meeting.
Do you need a motion to adjourn, or you just can say that you're adjourning?
Mr. Clerk?
Do we need a motion to adjourn, or?
No.
Okay.
Okay. This is the agenda for the Clovis Public Financing Authority in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. If you need assistance to access the council chambers to participate in this meeting, please contact the city clerk or general services director at 559-324-2060 or TTY 711. Notification 48 hours prior to the meeting will enable the city to make a reasonable arrangement to ensure accessibility to the council chambers. I will call the meeting to order and note for the record that the council members are present with the exception of Mayor Pro Tem Flores, who is abstaining. And I'll open this item to public comment. Any member of the public in chambers wish to address the council on the item that we're going to be considering? Seeing none in chambers, do we have anybody online?
No.
Mr. Clerk, we see no correspondence.
Correct, no.
Okay, I will close public comments. Administrative items. Administrative items are matters on the regular Clovis Public Financing Authority, CPFA, agenda other than public hearings. Item 1, consider approval CPFA resolution, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Clovis Public Financing Authority to authorizing the issuance and sale of lease revenue bonds to provide financing for the Landmark Square project generally located on the northeast corner of Clovis Avenue and 3rd Street, and approving related documents and official actions. Jay Stagel is our presenter. Jay.
Good evening again. So item 13, which was just heard, was approved by the City Council, which was the city authorization to proceed with the bonds. Item 14 in front of you is consideration and approval by the Board of Directors of the PFA in order to issue the bonds. So this allows for the financing authority to enter into agreements with both the city and actually sell the bonds, in which there is that leaseback mechanism for 30 years. So item 14 is for the Board of Directors. Staff's recommendation is for the Board of Directors of the PFA to authorize the issuance and sale of the lease revenue bonds to provide financing for the Landmark Square project.
Thanks, Jay. Any questions for Jay? Lynn?
Oh.
Bob?
Scott, can you help me understand just the procedures? And we're the PFA, we're also the city, so there's the same. So can you just help me understand that? Because this is the first bond I think I am involved with. So can you help sort of the structure, the process? You guys are also a part of this, and then because the law requires you to be on this, so you're also, that's why we're doing what we're doing right now.
Correct.
Okay.
As far as having the two agendas, yeah, you're meeting as the Public Financing Authority for this particular item, so it requires a separate agenda, separate resolution. The issuance of the bonds requires both the City Council approval and the Public Financing Authority approval, separately, yes.
And so this will be the only time we act as the PFA? Or?
For this type of transaction, yes. I mean, I may defer to Jay, but yes.
Yes, this is how until the next time, potentially with the fire station or some other mechanism where we want to go out for public debt, this would be the last time that you would meet until then.
Okay, so what is the authority of the PFA other than approving it? It doesn't have any oversight. Oversight belongs to our other hat. Is that what I'm understanding? So what's the authority of each one? Because it seems like, is it just something legally we have to do, or is it on the PFA hat, you can do this, and then on the City Council hat, you can do that? Because it seems like we're
the city couldn't issue the debt themselves. They needed the Public Finance Authority in order to issue the bonds. They weren't allowed to do that type of structure. So what this allows for is the Public Financing Authority to issue the bonds, and then they lease back that asset to the city. The Board of Directors doesn't have any payment obligations as far as there's no liability to you acting as Board of Directors, but you are approving the sale of the bonds so that the Public Financing Authority can issue those bonds for the project.
And there's no conflict being this typical. I'm looking to the ones who've done this before.
It may not feel typical, but yes, this is the typical process for these types of bonds.
Yeah, and this structure is authorized under the government code, correct?
Okay, all right. And then it talks about the successor agency being the other party with the city. Is this the successor agency, or no? 'Cause
No.
it used to be.
Yeah, the CCDA is, about 10 years ago, I think that went out. Yeah, that was with the old redevelopment agency. Correct.
So that is no longer a part, it's only the city and then us right now.
Well, the city still technically is the successor agency to the former redevelopment agency. I'm not sure that there's any outstanding debt still.
There is still
Okay.
tax allocation bonds outstanding, so in theory, there could be some reason for the PFA to meet again on those bonds. I don't see that happening in my career here, but they are still a member of that if the need arose to do something on those bonds outside of making normal debt service.
And then if there are issues with the bonds themselves, then it's not the PFA that hears that, it's the city council who would hear that from the public? I mean, who hears, I mean, where does the public go to if they had concerns? Or do they have both avenues potentially to go to?
I think practically speaking, it's going to be the city council.
The city council?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, the only issue they would probably have is that we did it, right? That you entered into the agreement. If it turns out that it was a bad idea, then we're going to blame Bob and then Jay. We're good up here. It's really but I mean, I think that would be the only other engagement conversation about that would be from a citizen's perspective potentially is, should you have done it or should you not do it? I think. Unless we defaulted or something, I suppose somebody could come back and talk about it.
I guess theoretically, and Scott, check me on this, but theoretically, you could have other members of the the Finance Authority for the City of Clovis other than council members. But I think that's just in theory. And then that would be kind of like a double check on the work that is being done in relation to those bonds, almost like a ad hoc committee or subcommittee of council. Is that right? Have you heard of any other communities that have their own financing authority members? Or is it always the council members? Because we don't like to give up that responsibility.
I think typically it is structured as just the council members, but I guess theoretically you could have set it up originally with an additional 2 members on that board or something else, or.
Yeah. But I think that those are good questions. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's why these questions need to be asked, because when something doesn't make sense, we probably ought to ask why we're doing it this way.
Well, I think you do it so infrequently. I mean, I think I can only think of maybe this is the second time I've done this in 20 years. I mean, I don't know. Second time, maybe?
I know that there's been another occasion.
Yeah, maybe.
Does bond counsel want to take a crack at the answer to the question of why we have we have the financing authority and then we have a council made up of the same people?
Chick, that would be for you.
Can I be there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yes, good evening. This is Chick Adams. I'm with the firm of Jones Hall. We actually drafted the Joint Exercise of Powers Agreement many, many years ago. It is a joint powers agency. It's between the city and the originally the redevelopment agency and now the successor agency. And it's a joint powers agency under state law. It is typical for cities to have a joint powers authority like this to do exactly what you are doing. This financing, like almost all general fund financings for cities in the state of California, requires a lease, and a lease requires 2 parties. So for the city to lease property, which it legally is required to do to support the debt, we need somebody on the other side of the lease. And a public financing authority is really by far the best vehicle to do that, because you control them and they are a public agency. It is very typical for the city council to serve in both capacities. Similarly, you perform in both capacities with the redevelopment agency. I know it's redevelopment is long gone, but back when it was alive and well, the city council was typically, and you were, the governing board of the redevelopment agency. Many cities have parking authorities where the city council also serves as the governing board of the parking authority. So there's nothing unusual about this. It's been done many, many times, and as Jay mentions, this is the common vehicle for cities in California to fund their capital improvements. I'm not sure if I actually answered the question, but if I didn't, let me know.
Yeah, so Chick, I guess this is Bob Whalen, and so the way that you've explained it is that you need 2 people in order to have a lease agreement, and I think that we would all understand that. But for me to have a lease agreement with myself seems to be an exercise in, well, I don't want to say futility, because apparently legally there must be some requirement there. But so are there genuinely opposite people on these types of questions related to the issuance of bonds, or whether it's for a parking authority or the economic development or redevelopment committee, or like in this case, a financing authority? Or is it always going to be the same people voting on the same lease and therefore, you know what the vote's going to be after you hear the first vote?
Well, yeah, I think the short answer is that probably in 99 out of 100 cases, the city council serves in both capacities. And the law is very clear that even though you are sitting as the governing board of both public agencies, they are in fact legally separate public agencies, and they can contract with each other as you're doing with this lease. So from a legal standpoint, this is very well recognized. And I think the important thing, as I say, to recognize is that the city is legally distinct from the financing authority. The city, of course, is a municipal corporation, and the financing authority is a joint powers agency. It is very common, far and away the most common, for the same people to sit as the governing board of each entity.
Bob, if you vote yes on this, then you'll be in opposition of yourself and will be good. So I think that's probably what you should do. That's right. Any, Lynn, your light's on? Do you have any?
I was going to make a motion
Okay.
long ago.
I just realized that I made a procedural error when I came to public comments. I said that public comments were regarding this agenda item, which is not correct. So I'm going to reopen public comments. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the city council on any matter within the council's jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, or 10 minutes per topic. Anyone wishing to be placed on the agenda for a specific topic should contact the city manager's office and submit correspondence at least 10 days before the desired date of appearance. Does anyone in chambers wish to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda?
I'll just note, that's probably wrong.
What's that?
I think that's probably not right. I think it's only, this is to address the members of the city council sitting as this public financing authority, not sitting as the council. So I think you were right the first time.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
And Bob's going to vote against himself. Mr. Clerk, what's your, and Mr. City Attorney?
We do this once every 5 years.
I know,
Yeah, so I think you were right the first time.
I think you were correct the first time around, so I think we're good.
Wow.
You have to uncorrect
I hope my wife's listening tonight.
Well, it's recorded.
Okay.
It's recorded.
So we're gonna go to public comments. We already did public comments for this item. I'm just gonna confirm, just so we don't have a procedural error. Is there anybody in council chambers wish to address council on this item? Seeing none, anybody online?
No.
Seeing none, do we have any correspondence?
We do not.
Seeing none, I'll close public comments and come back to the Clovis Public Financing Authority for discussion or for motion.
I will make the motion, sitting as the Public Finance Authority, that we authorize the issuance and sale of lease revenue bonds to provide financing for the Landmark Square project, generally located on the northeast corner of Clovis Avenue and 3rd Street, and approving related documents and official action.
I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Oh, I wanted to see what you...
Motion passes 3 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention. And we will reconvene as the Clovis City Council. We'll adjourn that and reconvene as the Clovis City Council to item number 15. Administrative items are matters on the regular City Council agenda other than public hearings. Item 15, consider approval of resolution approving the contract extension of Shelley Vinson as a contract extra help fire inspector 2 in accordance with Government Code 21224, and this item was continued from the March 1st meeting.
I was going to ask if Joe's coming back. Okay, then I'll go on. Well, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Tonight we are requesting the approval of a contract extension for a PERS retired annuitant, Shelley Vinson. As per law, the item is required to be heard on the regular agenda and not consent. Two recruitments for Shelley's position, which is fire inspector, were held in 2019, but we had great difficulty in attracting qualified candidates. So Shelley was hired in January of 2020 to complete the mandated fire inspections, new construction evaluations, and other fire prevention methods, while a recruitment for a permanent employee commenced. However, COVID-19 happened. With the emergency and the stay-at-home order, we were unable to complete the recruitment for this position. So tonight we're requesting an extension of Ms. Vinson's contract while we continue the recruitment. The extension would not exceed 1 additional year. The contract is Attachment A of Attachment 1 to the staff report. And I'm open for any questions.
Any questions for Shauna? Shauna, as a PERS annuitant, are we limiting her to $960 in a fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she'll fit within all those requirements. She can't make more than somebody in the same position as a full-timer, $960. Yeah, she'll follow all of those normal parameters.
Great, thank you.
Required.
If there's no questions from council, I will open this to the public. Any member of the public in chambers wish to address council on this item? Seeing none, do we have anybody online?
No.
Mr. Clerk, to begin any correspondence?
No.
Okay, I will close public comments and come back to the council for discussion or for action. And I second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Item 16, consider approval of a resolution accepting and authorizing the submission of the 2020 General Plan Annual Report, including the 2020 Housing Element Annual Progress Report, to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and the California Department of Housing and Economic Development. And Dave is our presenter.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you noted, this item is with regard to an annual progress report on our general plan, and more specifically, one of its components, the housing element. Just a little bit of background here. The annual progress report, or APR as we lovingly refer to it, is required by the California Government Code. The APR is intended to provide the council and the public with information on how we're implementing the general plan. The housing element component is really the primary feature of this APR. In fact, the general plan, well, I was going to say generally, the APR doesn't have any content or format requirements, except for that housing element portion, which has a very specific content requirement and format that's required. And you may have noticed in your electronic packet that there's an element of that APR, which is I think it's virtually impossible to read in an Excel format. We haven't figured out how to fix that. The spreadsheet format is so tight that it's locked and prohibited. We're prohibited from even modifying the format for presentation purposes. The APR structure, as we built it, is based on 6 sections, and I'll just mention what they are. There's an introduction and purpose, general plan summary, some background, talk a little bit about general plan amendments. There's a brief housing development update, and then the meat of the matter is the housing element annual progress report, which is really an appendix to the APR report itself. Really, this evening, we're just going to talk briefly about general plan amendments, and then Lily's going to come up and talk to you about the housing element annual progress report. In terms of general plan amendments, the state of California and the state law in general requires the general plan amendments be limited to 4 a year. And then it's not necessarily that there can be 4 sites or 4 sections that can be amended. Basically 4 times, or so you might consider it to be 4 batches. So on a single night, the council could consider a handful of amendments to do different things. and effectively that batch would be considered one plan amendment. Some cities, when they consider those 4 opportunities, they have a very rigid cycle, specific months where they'll be considered, and sort of plan a calendar around those. We're a lot more flexible than that. We don't have defined meeting times where general plans will be considered. We kind of let the development cycle tell us when a good time to schedule a general plan amendment is. If we get a lot of these over time, we might have to become a little more rigid in terms of spacing the general plan amendment opportunities out. But thus far, we've been successful in being pretty flexible. Over the 2020 calendar year, we had 4 applications for general plan amendments that were submitted for consideration. All of those applications were approved. There was just one of those amendments that was kind of what we think of as a traditional general plan amendment, where it involves an increase in density. That was with regard to the Bonadeli track map at Loma Vista, generally, I think, around Highland and Barstow Avenues. It was an increase in density from low to medium. 2 of those amendments were with regard to the Shaw Avenue specific plan and dealt with the drive-through access issue. One of them specifically was for Raising Cane's as a project-specific application, while the other was more of a general policy question that limited the prohibition on drive-throughs and changed the stipulation to a conditional use permit needing to be approved. The final general plan amendment under consideration, that was submitted for consideration, was one initiated by the city, and that was an amendment to the environmental safety element, and that was to incorporate airport land use compatibility criteria. So in all of these instances, the applications were considered by the Planning Commission and then brought forward to your council for final action and approval. As I mentioned, the state does indeed require this APR to be generated and submitted, but they've really left the majority of the format and the content up to local agencies and encouraged local agencies to define what's important to them and therefore to us. So the structure that you see in front of you is really just a reflection on what staff identified as kind of key features. We've reviewed a number of examples from other cities. But we've noted that new topics and issues can be added to future APRs. So if there's any items tonight or really at any other time that you think, hey, we really should include that, we'd like to see that in a summary format, you can just let us know. We can fold those in. Some of the topics that we've identified, based on what we're seeing right now, just in the first part of 2021, that will be of interest, and we think probably included in the next APR, include a summary of annexation activity, sphere of influence expansions, and urban center master planning projects, of which there are already a handful that are either in the queue or expect to be submitted shortly. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Housing Element Annual Progress Report, and I'll bring up Lily, and she'll walk you through that.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, council members. So as Dave indicated, the Housing Element Annual Progress Report is required by state law and must be submitted to HCD and OPR by April 1st. The APR documents the progress made by the city in the implementation of housing element programs and progress towards its 5th cycle RHNA requirements. It includes data related to building activity and development entitlement activities in 2020. So this table here summarizes the progress the city has made towards its Cycle 5 RHNA requirements. The city was allocated a total of 6,328 units for its Cycle 5 housing requirements. And those units are categorized by income level. So you have between very low income to above moderate income levels. In 2020 or last year, a total of 1,124 units were constructed, 479 of which are moderate income level, and 645 are above moderate income level. With that, the city's total remaining arena numbers are 3,379 units.
Lily, can I ask you a question related to those figures?
Yes.
Sometimes when we talk about affordability, we talk about actual affordability. Sometimes when we talk about affordability, we talk about density. And so if you can just clarify for us, because I see here that we're, at least in this table, we're focused on income level as opposed to density. Are we talking about income level here, or are we talking about density?
Yes, so for the purpose of this report, it is income level.
Okay.
For the purpose of planning, it's density, but in this report, this is income level.
So just for the report, it's income level. And then they do, at some point, is there a nexus between income level and density for planning purposes?
I believe there is, Dave. I know it translates from density to income level, but that is not always accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would be untruthful if I told you that I fully understood all of the nuances of state housing law. Very, very few people do. Our understanding is that in terms of planning and the housing element for the inventory of sites to accommodate housing needs, that the general criteria that HCD uses is a density-based criteria. It's not necessarily the only thing that they look at, but the general criteria is that higher density, and right now we're looking at 20 units an acre are required for the low income category.
So for our planning purposes, I'm sorry, you said 20 units per acre?
20 units per acre is required to be in place for the low income category.
Do you know what it is for very low?
For inventory purposes, they're grouped. They allow us to group those together. So there's actually three. Yeah, there's three categories between extremely low, very low, and low. Can be kind of grouped into one category for inventory purposes.
So when we talk about planning, we're talking about 20 units per acre in order to fit into low, very low, and then there was super low. What was the other one?
Extremely low.
Extremely low. And if we are able to get to those densities, then we would be able to hit those particular numbers.
We have to satisfy HCD that we have the inventory to create units at that density. If we build projects that are multifamily, whether they're at 20 units an acre or some other density, we would still report them in this format by whether they were truly affordable to people in those various income groups.
In this format, you're talking about
in the APR.
Yeah. Okay.
It does get confusing.
Can Lily or Dave, can you guys give me the figures that we have calculated for low, very low, and extremely low as far as income levels are concerned? If you guys know.
Yeah, I don't have the 2020 numbers. In general, the low income category, so extremely low to low, are based on being up to from 0 basically to 80% of median family income. I know that back in preparation of the housing element, which is when I last saw the detailed numbers, the median household income according to the state was, I believe, just under 48,000, and according to the feds, according to HUD, it was something like 10,000 more, 57,58.
And so when we talk about because I think you've answered this question, but I just want to make sure I'm clear on it. So when you talk about the median family income, you're referring to the median family income in all of the state of California, not just our region.
In the case of the state number, that's a Fresno County number.
Okay.
In the case of the feds, I believe that is a state median income number, and that's for a family of 4. That's a sliding scale, so the smaller the family, the lower that assumption on income is, and the higher the number of persons, the higher the income is assumed.
So in our region, at least I know you're going from your best guess. In 2020, in order to qualify between extremely low and low, you would have to be between $0 income level to 48,000 income level for a family of 4. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly.
Let me, I pulled the numbers from the housing element, and admittedly, these numbers go back to 2014. So they're, at this point, 7 years, going on 7 years old.
Okay.
The assumptions that we made at the time were that a low-income household at up to 70% of area median income, let's see, for a family of 4, they could afford a gross monthly rent of $869 and a purchase price of roughly $164,000. So we're talking about 7 years ago. Again, I don't have the updated numbers. I don't want to put Andy on the spot, but he may or may not have any updated numbers.
Dave, I did pull the numbers earlier. So in Fresno County, the median income is $70,000 for a family of 4. So anything between extremely low and very low income for a family of 4 is between $26,000 and $35,000 roughly.
Okay. And it looks like Andy has some additional numbers to throw our way.
Okay, so on HCD's website, which these are the tables that we use to determine eligibility for all of our housing programs, both for federal and state funding, and I believe are the tables that are used to determine eligibility for these tables as well. I'm just going to go with the family of 4. Dave was correct in saying that it varies based on household size. But for a family of 4, extremely low income in Fresno County is $26,200 or less. For a family of 4 at very low income is $43,150. For low income, it's $69,050. So percentage-wise, low income is 80%, very low is 60%, extremely low is, I believe, less than 40% of median income, just to help you cross those boundaries.
Okay.
Median income is $86,300, so that'd be the 100%, and moderate is 120%. Is $103,550.
So when we come to the regional housing needs allocation, we talk in terms of income, and then for planning, it converts to density. And regardless of what those numbers are for income level, when it comes to planning purposes, when we're at 20 units per acre, it can be, that'll include anywhere from low to very low to extremely low. Am I hearing that all correctly so far? Okay. And then that doesn't matter whether these are condominiums or apartments?
Yes.
When it comes to density?
Based on income.
Yeah.
When
it comes to planning purposes for density?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the answers to those questions.
Any other questions for staff? That's okay. That's right.
Almost done.
Can I
Carry on.
just build on? Can I just
Yes, go ahead.
build on what, since we're on the topic? So for the 6,328, even if we built 328, whatever level it is, say, but it's not low and very low, it doesn't take into account that potentially we can have 6,000 also homes who are renting and or have sold at a level in which low income could have purchased, but that never gets counted though. It's only new development, correct?
Right, this is pertaining to new development.
So even if we built 10,000 homes and we had 6,000 new homes enter into the affordable market, we don't get any credit for that. It's what you build new. And so it really doesn't even give a true sense of what a city potentially can be providing its residents. Right? Because it's all new homes. That's all this law ever looks at. It's just new homes. So, like, if I could have bought 5 homes and sold it $50,000 each, being a nice person, but the city won't get credit for that, saying, oh, the city actually provided 5 affordable homes because people who made a certain level of income could get it. It doesn't even account for that, correct?
Well, if these new construction homes were so the methodology is the sales price, right? And so some of these could be deed restricted, which is automatically, affordable. or what the consultant did was they found an average of the housing costs, and they looked that information up through Zillow to find how much these homes were sold for, and compare that with the actual valuation that the city has at the time of building permit. And so that's how they're able to determine whether or not each home is considered very low, low, moderate, or above moderate income. So it's the value the home was sold at. Exactly.
Okay. I think for me, for the future, if we're paying someone to get these numbers for us, I would like to know what I just said. I think that would really be very eye-opening to say, you know, I know Clovis, you built 1,124, great. But actually on the market, there were 20 homes that actually sold at an affordable rate. I think that shows, okay, there is a market there, just not new homes, but there's still a market where moderate, low income actually are buying homes. And I think that gets lost in this discussion. And if we can start to gather that, I think we can really start to make a presentation in which, you know, kind of like when we build Habitat for Humanities, right? I know that's a new home, so that gets counted, but there are, I think it's happening. It's just not getting captured. And it may be off topic, but for moving forward, if the planning department can start to somehow capture this, I think it helps the narrative that we're doing all we can. We get no money to help us here because where does the money come for you to build low, very low, extremely low? There's nothing. But yet the market is taking care of some of this as well. That's hopefully you get what I'm saying.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. So I get the numbers.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're presenting today.
You're talking about existing housing stock.
Yeah.
Right. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. I do believe that when HCD comes up with these allocation numbers, they do take into consideration your existing housing stock and obviously your demographics as well. So I'm assuming it's considered at that point before the numbers are allocated to cities.
But the point of this is to add new housing stock.
Yes.
I think that's the distinction. So what you said is one factor, but I think the point of this is, can you add 6,328 new housing to your inventory? Not can you turn over.
But if I add 6,000 and yet in my marketplace 3,000 went to low income, I'm doing it, in other words, you see? I'm doing it because initially when those houses sold, it was sold at high income, but potentially someone sold enough. Because in other words, we hit that number, but it can't just be new homes. We can get there, but then does it mean that the home that was built at Buchanan Estates can never be counted as affordable home, you see? And so that question goes, I think it can, if and when it does rent and or sell for that price. But it never gets captured because it was taken into account when it was built only.
It will never sell for anything that matches those numbers, I would imagine.
But if it did, I'm just saying that if it did, how do we capture that and how do we make it where it's showing that, we're doing something?
I think you're suggesting that the turnover rate for some of the less expensive homes in the city of Clovis might be higher than some of the more expensive homes. So the opportunity to purchase lower priced homes in the city of Clovis is there. And, and regardless of what the law says, I think that, at least from our perspective, we've always focused on, okay, well, let's deal with reality. How is it that we can continue to make the city of Clovis an affordable place for people who want to take advantage of our safe streets, our good quality education, our sense of community. We're focused on providing a place for people to do that, regardless of what their income level is. The state is focused in a different area because they, frankly, I don't know why they don't listen well, perhaps. But I think that your point about existing housing stock and the turnover rate for the more affordable homes may be higher. It's a theory. I don't know if it would bear out in the numbers, but it's something I think perhaps maybe worth exploring. And to your point, if we're paying somebody to come up with these numbers anyway, we might as well pay them to come up with these types of numbers as well.
Jose?
And I think in some neighborhoods, your theory would work out, but not in Buchanan Estates. But in some more moderate or humble neighborhoods where houses turn over, but the state does want addition. They want to add more housing. There's a net sum gain. But you're saying, but there is opportunity for newcomers to Clovis to find a moderately priced home, and it's in these neighborhoods like where I grew up. I'm sure when those houses turn over, they don't. It's not a premium price. They cost less, and they might fit these numbers, and we don't account for that. That there is an opportunity for people to come to Clovis, live in the Stanford Edition, and it doesn't cost that much to come into Clovis. They could live next to Sierra Vista, and it doesn't cost that much to live in Clovis. They can go behind the rodeo grounds, and it doesn't cost that much to live in Clovis, and we never account for that. And sure, the other neighborhoods, especially the brand new ones, where the price of land is so expensive, will never meet these numbers. But what about the pre-existing homes? And it's more for that dialogue. It's not what the state wants. It's not what the state wants, but at least there's opportunity for new arrivals to Clovis to have affordable housing.
Lily, please, your opportunity to carry on.
No worries, not to worry. Okay, moving on. So, the city has a total of 20 housing element programs. They are designed to help achieve housing affordability and to accommodate housing development in the community. I won't go over all the programs as they are all the same as they were last year and the year before that, but here are some highlights from last year. The city applied for a $5 million Cal Home grant through HCD in 2020. If funded, it would be used for owner-occupied rehabilitation loan program, mobile home replacement program, and the acquisition rehab resale loan program for low-income households. I don't think the award has been announced as of recently anyway. The city has provided subsidies to the following affordable housing development programs: the Stanford Edition infill. The city did purchase, demolish, and subdivide a property in the Stanford Edition to grant to the Habitat of Humanity to be used for the construction of two single-family homes that are to be purchased by low-income veteran households. The city was granted $1 million for its first-time homebuyer program from HCD, which it will begin taking applications from low-income homebuyers in the near future. Prior to COVID restrictions, the city provided home repair grants to 34 low-income households to correct health and safety related deficiencies. And the city granted the Affordable Housing Development Impact Fee Reduction Program for $1 million for a 60-unit affordable housing complex last year. And in 2020, the city permitted a total of 8 accessory dwelling units. With that, staff is recommending that the council adopt a resolution accepting and authorizing the submission of the 2020 General Plan Annual Progress Report and including the 2020 Housing Element Annual Progress Report to the OPR and HCD. This concludes our report, and we are open for questions.
Thank you, Lily. Any questions for Lily?
Just one. Lily, can you go back one slide? And this is probably fairly relevant. Number 10, the encouraging and facilitating accessory units. The write-up in the staff report talks about the cottage home program, and then also talks about ADUs. That's where we got the 8. Yeah?
Yes.
Is there any thought given to a cottage home program that would allow a second unit on a non-alley loading lot, or the places where we've got our cottage home program, which is mostly in the Old Town and mostly on those alley-related properties? But is there any thought that we've given to allowing some kind of a cottage home program on just a regular single-family lot that could
I had a couple people ask me that recently, and I've really never thought about that, but is there any market for that sort of a thing, that, to get more units?
I believe we are working on that, and Dave will, provide input.
We've actually been taking a look at that over the last couple of months. Right now, we have a fairly unusual license agreement, if you will, regarding the use of the cottage home plans that's specific for the program. And at this point, we haven't been comfortable that we can expand that program beyond the initial sort of limitations. We do occasionally get requests for the plans that are not necessarily a 100% fit through the program, and the owner of those plans will heavily discount the sale of individual plan sets to folks who are outside the program parameters. So they still get a very good deal on a plan set, and they're pre-plan checked, but they're being actually sold by the owner of the plan. So we're looking at the possibility of trying to rework effectively a license for those plans, but we're a little bit kind of stuck at this point in that relationship. So not that it couldn't or won't be different if you ask us a year from now, but we have looked at it, and then we're just kind of in that trying to work it out situation.
Yeah, there might be something there for, like, bigger lots, neighborhoods with bigger lots, or someone if they wanted, again, it's not a cottage home, so it would be a separate program in my mind, a different kind of a unit on a lot that someone might want to put a small home. But it was just a question that I was asked a couple of times over the last month that I had not really thought about. But if we could help people do that in a way that, you know, conforms with our setbacks and all that stuff, we would be ahead of ourselves, as opposed to getting complaints of people do it and then it doesn't match. Right. So, okay, thanks.
Lily, I have a question. If someone buys a lot and there's a house there, let's say it's a larger lot, they scrape the house and put a fourplex in, do we get credit for 4 units or 3 units, or how does that work? What's the bookkeeping on that?
Well,
as long as they're affordable.
It'll have to be arena site, Dave, right?
Yeah, it's an arena area.
Okay.
They scrape it, they take one house, they make it 4. Do we get credit for 4 or for 3?
The answer is probably that we get credit for 4. It depends on if the existing unit was in some way definitively affordable, in which case we might have a different situation to deal with. But if it's a standard removal of one house and the construction of the new fourplex, I think we would get credit for.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? I will open this to the public. Any member of the public in chambers wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, do we have anybody online?
No.
Ms. Clerk, we receive any correspondence?
We did not.
Okay, I'll close public comment and come back to the council for discussion or for action.
I have one more comment before there's a motion. Yeah, I always look at it as a potential for funding if and when there is funding. I think that being able to not provide it, because we don't build any of this, you know, it's the private sector who comes in because there's no funding. But I always look at it as, if there is funding, hopefully these numbers shows that we are, one, able to do it quickly and also have the need. Because on those other areas, we are very low in. And so somehow, if we can sort of use it to that advantage of, hey, we need help, come help us, because every time there's help, it goes to our neighbor to the west, and it never comes to us. And then we get, you know, the negative criticism of not doing anything, yet we haven't done anything to not allow any of this as well. So I think that I always see it that way, where, you know, potentially it can look good on a grant application someplace saying that we need help with being able to build here. So
Any other discussion? Bob?
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and move that we approve the resolution accepting and authorizing the submission of the 2020 General Plan Annual Report, including the 2020 Housing Element Annual Progress Report to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and the California Department of Housing and Community Development.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Item 17, consider approval of a resolution approving the annual review and update to the Regional Housing Needs Rhn Overlay District map of parcels and associated list reflecting those parcels that qualify for development for Rhn Overlay projects. I believe, Lynn, you have to recuse yourself because of proximity.
That's correct.
And there's snacks back there if you want to stay. Dave is our presenter. Dave.
You know, Scott, I think I will, just because it's a removal, those are, I think, are a bit more, even though the authority is to the planner, because it's a removal, I just want to be able to not have any, perceived conflict of, wanting to.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Councilman's got a property within, I think it's 700 or so feet.
Yeah.
It's between the 500 and the 1,000, which is a little bit different requirement for recusal than the 500 foot or less. And I think the difference between Councilmember Aspects is her conflict is with a site to be added, which allows, under the current ordinance, council does have a little bit more discretion on sites added versus sites removed. Yeah, Councilman Manatua's site is in proximity to a removed site, and there is less discretion there. So it's a little bit, not quite an apples to apples comparison. So I think the director has the authority even during the year to remove sites that no longer are qualified. Tonight's exercise, I guess, as far as removal of the sites that are being recommended, the 5 sites that are being recommended to be removed, I would really call that almost kind of a cleanup record-keeping item for the removal sites. Again, there's really no discretion there. The director has the authority already under the existing code to remove those sites. So, long story short, I think you're safe to participate in tonight's discussion because, again, the removal sites, really not much discretion at all.
And my worry is always with the perception, because if it was done not in an agendized item, right, then the perception is it was already done and but because it's agendized together, then the way things are perceived is, why wouldn't you remove it? It's so close to you anyway, you approved it kind of deal, when I may not want to remove it at all personally and or policy-wise. So that's why I prefer to, perception is, So you're recusing yourself? Yes, so I'm going to recuse myself as well.
And we don't have a problem doing this with 3, as long as we have them 3
You've got
members.
Yes.
Okay. Good night, Lynn. Bye, Bon. Mr. Richard, go ahead. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. This is the last item other than the workshop item on the COVID item, so.
We're having cake. Oh. Bon, you should take these home to your, oh, you got one, okay. Bye. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and remaining members of the council. As you noted, this is an annual review and update of the map and list associated with the Regional Housing Needs Overlay District. I know that we're familiar with the overlay district, and I did provide some background. This is background that you've seen before, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You know, the housing elements are required for every every city and county. They have to be updated every 8 years. Each update's called a cycle, and we did our 5th cycle, or our last update, back in 2016. For each cycle, we have to have we have to demonstrate that we have land available to accommodate our housing needs as determined by HCD and the Fresno COG. Inventory must be available, as we were just talking about, for the APR, must be available for low income, which includes both extremely low, very low, and low, also for moderate and above moderate income housing opportunities. HCD generally looks at housing income levels according to the density that's available on the sites that are included. And for the low income opportunity sites, housing opportunity sites, the density has to allow at least 20 units an acre. Back when we were working on our 5th cycle housing element, our analysis showed that some of the prior cycle RHNA inventory was still outstanding in the high density category. So we didn't have as much inventory as we needed to back in the 4th cycle. As a result, HCD required the city to designate some additional land to accommodate 4,425 units, again at that 20 unit per acre or greater density. We looked at a variety of tools at the time and ended up adopting a couple of programs, including the establishment of the Rhn Overlay District, which was adopted by the council back in November of 2018. And again, it was one of a couple of tools that were specifically enacted to help the city meet its RHNA carryover burden. The overlay itself allows multifamily housing between 35 and 43 units per acre as a permitted use by right. That means there are no public hearings or discretionary applications that are required. Overlay sites do have the opportunity to continue to develop at their pre-existing density. So let's say that there was an R1 zoning on one of these sites that was in place before the overlay. A builder, developer, owner could come in and build at that R1 density still, even with the overlay in place. Projects that take advantage of the overlay must adhere to the development standards that are outlined in specifically that overlay district. And that includes the normal development standards like setbacks, building heights, parking, and so forth. In terms of eligibility criteria, the overlay does apply to all residentially zoned properties between 1 and 10 acres. Larger parcels can qualify if they can be divided down into usable sites of no more than 10 acres. Importantly, parcels must be free of constraints which would preclude them from developing as regional housing needs overlay projects. So we look at things like the physical characteristics of the site, the size, shape, and topography of a site, HCD regulations and the guidance for their inventory, RHNA inventories. We look at entitlement history, legal actions and restrictions, enforceable commitments, things that would preclude realistically or legally the potential to build an RHN project on one of these sites. The eligible parcels, once they've been kind of screened for these criteria, have to be shown on a map and a list of sites in order to be sort of included in the overlay. The map, the original map was adopted by the City Council back in 2018, and it must be reviewed annually by the Council. Parcels that are no longer eligible can be removed by staff. The Director of Planning and Development Services kind of monitors those sites and can remove sites from the map if they're not eligible. But new parcels can only be added during the City Council's annual review, and you would do so as necessary to allow the city to continue to meet our RHNA obligation. So I want to just kind of walk you briefly through the status of the overlay program and where we are today. We initially started with 32 sites in the program, generating about 4,261 dwelling units. Those are the sites shown in yellow. Right off the bat, we found 2 sites that looked like they were eligible, that they already had other projects going on, and we pulled them off really before we started. Those are the ones that have the red boxes around them. So we started our program with 30 sites, generating about 4,037 dwelling units. That gave us a surplus of sites of about 948 units. So when we talk about surplus, we're talking about a surplus of sites in our inventory above what the state told us that we needed. Since we established the program, a couple of high-density projects have been built or are under construction, or really right about ready to start construction. Those are the 2 projects along the Willow Avenue corridor, Butterfly Gardens, which has a permit ready to issue and should be started within the next few weeks, and the Solvita Commons project, which is the Housing Authority project up at Willow and Alluvial. So the effect of those 2 projects more or less just adds to our inventory and increase that inventory for descriptive purposes, at least up to about 1,083 units. And that's really what the inventory was before we looked at any sites needing to be removed. But in tracking projects that were being proposed and then eventually approved and built on these sites, we identified that there were 5 sites that have either been built or are under construction with non-RHN qualifying projects. So mostly those are single-family projects on these sites. So when we look at those sites that now also need to be removed from the list, effectively what that does is reduce the surplus of sites down to 366, which is where we are today in March of 2021. We've also analyzed the remaining sites. So the remaining sites in yellow there, as to what their status is and whether there are any projects coming that may require consideration of future removal. And we did identify that there are a series of additional projects on these yellow sites that may cause them to be removed at some point. In fact, there are, I think, a total of 5 or 6 sites may need to be removed, including a total of 1,121 units. We don't know when or if all of those projects will come off. We don't know if any of them will actually proceed to the point where they would need to come off, but it's certainly possible that they will continue along the path that some of them have started and eventually have to come off the list and the map. Those are the sites there that we see as potentially needing to come off at some point. If all of those sites were to come off, we'd experience a shortfall of about 755 sites. So we have a surplus today, again, of about 366. We have a series of additional sites that may need to come off at some point in the future. If they all come off, we'd have a shortfall of nearly 755. So in considering that potential shortfall, we began to look for additional sites that would qualify or potentially qualify for inclusion on the overlay map. And we began by looking at really several dozen sites throughout the city that looked like they might qualify. We compared those against the criteria that I described a little bit ago, as well as with some specific information or specific standards and criteria from HCD. We consulted with HCD about potential sites on 2 or 3 occasions, and we ended up identifying 6 sites that qualified and were eligible for inclusion in the program and should be added to the map. So all of those sites, and we've identified them in chronological order as 33 through 38, those sites are added, or when those sites are added, we would generate 1,155 new units to the inventory. When we consider those new units along with our potential shortfall, we'd be back up on the positive and have a surplus of about 400 units. So this information was taken to and presented to a public meeting last week that was noticed in the Business Journal, as well as through several of our social media outlets. The meeting was not particularly well attended. It was pretty sparse. As a result of that, we didn't get any direct comments or feedback on our map. The Clovis Roundup did pick up the story and published an article kind of enhancing the public notice and distribution of the information. I did receive one phone call and an email from the same person asking questions about what the map meant and asked for a copy of the presentation, but no either support or opposition from that person. There is on the dais a request from Jason Sabaji for consideration by your council to add a site that's not shown on this map. It's a 2-acre, a little over 2-acre site located in the vicinity of Woods Elementary. That request for consideration was received late last week after the public meeting and after we had done the analysis in the staff report. For those reasons, and because there is a map, an active subdivision map on the site, we're not recommending that it be included on the map at this time. But if the owner is desirous of participating next year, and the site is otherwise eligible, it could be added next year. Based on this information, staff is recommending adoption of a resolution which would approve this annual review and update and authorize staff to submit the 6 new sites that were identified in green on the prior map to HCD for inclusion in the city's RHNA inventory. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave? Bob?
Thank you. David, the 5th cycle is going to be coming to an end in 2023. Did I read that right?
Effectively, yes. The sixth cycle has a due date roughly at the end of 2023 or the beginning of 2024.
Okay. And are we anticipating any carryover as a result of that cycle?
Not thus far, but that analysis will be done as part of the 6th cycle housing element when we get ramped up.
Okay. Has there been any, I think, you know, to Bong's point earlier, sometimes it feels like this is a bit of an unfunded mandate where, you know, we zone things for, or zone land for folks to come in and build some of this high density that the state is requesting of us. And then those people who know the business come in and say, well, it just doesn't pencil out unless there's going to be some sort of funding to subsidize this. Has there been any movement that you're aware of at the state level or even at the federal level in order to help the development community build at a density level that they can do, that they can build at basically by right in some of these overlays?
In terms of a funding source, or?
Yeah, there's just been a lot of, I think that people are coming to understand, based on some of the commentary I'm hearing from a variety of news sources, that the affordable housing, which converts to density when it comes to planning purposes, is difficult to construct because of the costs associated with building at that type of density. And so there has been, I think, an honest conversation taking place in some corridors at the state level where it doesn't matter how much a city can zone for 20 units or more per acre. If it's not going to pencil out, it's never going to get built. And so I'm hoping that at some point the state of California is going to open up their eyes to the aspirational goal and the reality on the ground. And I've been hoping that maybe beyond just the news sources I'm hearing from, where there's this recognition of that disconnect between the aspiration and the reality, that somebody's going to be able to say, hey, you know what, they're right, and we need to figure out some way to subsidize some of this higher density housing. But I haven't heard of any bills working their way through or any budget language, or despite all of the the conversation that may be taking place, when it comes to maybe the platitudes of trying to build affordable housing, that anybody, has turned those platitudes into actual dollars and cents. And I'm hoping maybe you have, at the state level, heard that there is a movement about in order to fund or subsidize some of this higher density housing. Looks like Luke has some comments to make as well.
So there is a growing realization that the money's needed, and there is some money flowing that way. It is still much less than was available back in the redevelopment era, when that was the primary source of affordable housing. But it is starting to flow at the state level. Clovis does not typically compete well in those grants. Again, it's one of those things that we don't have as significant a percentage of our population that are disadvantaged. So when the grants are given out, they typically go to the more disadvantaged communities. So they're not coming toward projects in Clovis as much as we'd like to see them.
Yeah, no, that seems really odd to me. It's almost like a catch-22. We're being asked to build high-density housing, and so that people who are disadvantaged can take advantage of what the city of Clovis has to offer, which is a lot of really great things for basically economic upward mobility. And yet, because we're not disadvantaged, we are not able, well, at least the developers are telling us they're unable to build, despite the fact that they can build by right, 20 units per acre. So hopefully we can move the conversation forward in that direction as well, is that if they, so maybe as we have conversations about this topic at the state level, that they can see the catch-22.
Yes, the demand for the subsidies still far outweighs the supply. So there's not enough to go around. We're successful, or a project in Clovis was successful in getting some funding, and that's Butterfly Gardens, and they will be starting construction soon. But that doesn't come close to really meeting our need.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you. And David, I did want to comment. I really appreciate the work that has been put in by you and your staff, and working through what is a real challenging process for us as a city, and to be able to look forward and say, okay, well, there's some potential for some of these sites being removed based on what we're able to observe, and getting ahead of that curve and saying, okay, well, if they may be removed, maybe we should look for other opportunities. And I'm glad that you're continuing to scour the city for other opportunities in case they do get removed. So I appreciate that work that you've done.
Jose?
Okay, so like the request Mr. Subaji had, anyone, if they meet the criteria, anyone can make requests such as his, that their property be included in, is it the next year's overlay, or can they just come in, say they even have a project, say a developer actually wants to do it, which is hard to believe, but but they have identified a piece of land that is not on our overlay. How does that work? Do they have to wait for the next year, or can they do it just like a regular project?
The overlay is, the overlay district is written in a way that really anticipates the map being reviewed and updated once annually. The exception, I think, would be if we're monitoring the inventory and it looks like we're going upside down on sites, we're going to get a shortfall. Then we are required by HCD to make sure that we have replacement sites. In that case, we would bring something back to you midterm, if you will. Scott, I don't know if you want to provide a different answer.
Well, let me clarify the question. So a developer owns land, not on the overlay, and through their own initiative, they get a grant for the subsidies that Bob talked about. And it's, every unit is going to cost $500,000, but he's got the money, got the funding, got the land, but it's not on the overlay. So how does that occur? Do we get in the way because it's not on an overlay, or do we let it happen? How does that happen?
Parcels that want to take advantage of the structure of the overlay have to be included on the map. And as I noted, at this point, the clear opportunity to be included on the map is with this annual update.
Every year.
Yes.
So tomorrow someone has that land, got that subsidy, it'd be 364 days from now.
This is the regional housing overlay is a by right. If in that situation, if they weren't on the map, they could come in and do a rezone on the property. Right, through the regular process anytime in between. But the map, that's a publicly noticed thing, is intended to be once a year unless something happens and we're really upside down, as Dave said. But they could use the normal rezone process.
We would invite that fight because some neighborhoods wouldn't want this in their neighborhood.
Correct.
Because if they're in the Rhn overlay, it's by right.
Correct.
So they would either have to wait 364 days or have a fight.
Correct. They're both public hearings. This is a public hearing. This was noticed. These sites are going to be zoned in such a manner. Anytime there's a zoning change, you have to go through that public process. We go through it kind of in a wholesale fashion here. Had we gotten the request in time to include it in the map that was publicly noticed, we could have added it now. But since we didn't, it would have to go through its own public process, public hearing process.
I just, if you don't mind, I'd like to add first a note of thanks to Jason and John Sobaji for talking about maybe adding the Reardon Avenue location in the Rhn overlay for next year. I do think that there is a due process component that we certainly want to be cognitive of in what we do as a council. And so for somebody to come in, after we've already had our public hearings on some of this and say, hey, we want to add our property, it's like, great, keep that, we'll keep that in mind for next year. But for us to, at some point, reverse all of the due process that we've had for this present overlay is, something that I think would just cause us unnecessary delay in the present request for the approval of the resolution with this new overlay. But I do think that there's, some great opportunity for us to work with the Sobajis in the future and maybe get them to a spot where they want to be entitled to be able to build there by right. I'm excited about the possibility of them thinking they can pull that off. I don't know if they've got any immediate plans. If they've got immediate plans, I'd certainly like to know what they are. And perhaps maybe we can move next year's annual review up a little bit if that's going to allow them to move more aggressively forward on what they have in store for that particular piece of property. But I think for our purposes right now, we want to make sure that we're honoring our process so far this year, and then maybe next year we can have the Sobajis on board.
And just as kind of following up on Bob's catch-22 situation, if a affordable housing complex is funded by state grant, that makes it a prevailing wage job, correct? Generally, isn't that usually part of the requirement?
Yes, generally if there's public funds involved, then it's a prevailing wage.
And that causes the costs to go up potentially substantially.
Correct.
So it's you get money for it, but it costs you money. So it puts us in a difficult position because we don't get, even if we were to use our funds, we're in the same boat. So
we would do what Fresno did. Fresno allowed a housing project at McKinley and Blackstone, and every unit there, I understand, was like $500,000 per unit. But they just allowed it because it was subsidized by the government, and they had the land. And yes, every single unit was outrageous. But Fresno City didn't pay anything. It was that subsidy of taxpayers' money from a federal source that paid for that building. And it is affordable housing. It will be when it's finished. So
there's a lot of moving pieces, and it doesn't make it no matter how much we want to do it, sometimes it does not make it easy to do. But hopefully we'll get there. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll open this to the public. Any member of the public in chambers? I'm sorry, Bob? Scott?
Just a reminder before you actually get to your motion, there's only 3 of you for this item. We do need unanimity among the 3 of you. It's approval of a resolution, so a 2-to-1 vote would not be sufficient. We need 3.
No pressure, Bob. Thank you. Any member of the public in chambers wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, do we have anybody online?
No.
Other than the Sabajis, did we get any correspondence?
We did not.
Okay, I'll close public comments and come back to council for discussion or for action.
I'll move that we approve the resolution, which is a resolution approving the annual review and update of the Regional Housing Needs Overlay District map of parcels and associated list reflecting those parcels that qualify for development as a Regional Housing Needs Overlay project.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes 3-0, 3-0, 2 exemptions. Now we come to workshop for the Clovis City Council to conduct a workshop to discuss the impact on ongoing city operations during the COVID-19 state of emergency as declared by the federal government, state of California, county of Fresno, and city of Clovis, and to explore actions the city may take in response to the crisis. Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So I'm going to run through kind of the normal data I usually run through with you, just as an update. However, the graphs look a little different. The state is changing their data system and how they present the graphs. So the information is all similar, but presented in a little bit different format.
I'm looking, Mike's. I can't hear you.
No.
She may be listening, and she went out the back door. She's not still back. Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
So in this graph, the dark black line represents the cases per 100,000, new cases per 100,000, and the gray line represents the state number. The black line is the Fresno County number. So you can see that similar trends. We had a huge spike at one point that far exceeded the state, and then our secondary spike was a little less, but they're following similar trends. We are dropping not quite as fast as the state is, but are continuing to drop. This is the Clovis cases, and this is it doesn't show a 7-day average or anything. It's just the number of new cases per day. As you can see, we have well past the peak of the surge and dropping. Still not as low as we were back in late summer, early fall, but hopefully heading in that direction. This graph compares the deaths per 100,000 in the state and the county. The gray line again is the state rate, and the black line is the county rate, and then the little blue bars or columns are the actual daily deaths that were reported on that date. But again, these are dropping from our peak, following the same general pattern as the new cases, but lagging behind it, as would be expected. This is the hospitalizations, with the blue representing the total hospitalizations and the red representing the ICU hospitalizations related to COVID. And again, these are following a similar pattern and dropping well off of the peak that we were seeing at the beginning of the year, shortly after the holidays. So here's our current numbers. Now, these numbers will be updated tomorrow, but these are the numbers that are currently being reported by the state. 12.6 adjusted new cases per 100,000. That's down from 16.6 2 weeks ago, so it's headed in the right direction. Still have a ways to go before we get into the red tier, though. 5.3% positivity rate. That's down from 6.6%. and a 6.8% health equity quartile positivity rate, which is down from 8.3. So those two numbers are good and would probably put us in the red tier, but the first number, the adjusted cases per 100,000, still exceeds the threshold. Don't know what the new numbers are going to be out tomorrow. I suspect we're probably still going to be slightly above the red tier, and we'll remain in the purple tier, but we'll have to see tomorrow what gets reported out by the state. I think that changed to 10. Yes. Yes, to get to the red tier.
Does that go by county or by region when they decide what color the tier is?
That's county. The regional number that they went by was the last number, the ICU availability, and that was what triggered the stay-home order that shut down even outdoor dining and such. We're reporting a 36.1% ICU availability rate, which is up from 16.8 2 weeks ago, so that number's doing much better. And 15 was the threshold that they were looking for on the projected ICU availability. That's what led to the stay-home order, and then what led to it being lifted was when the projection showed us exceeding 15. So vaccines are the big issue right now. The supply of vaccines continues to be the limiting factor. The county has a web page up, with locations that are providing vaccines, including United Health Centers. However, you go to most of those facilities or most of those pages, and their appointments are booked very rapidly, so it's tough to get an appointment. So there's still, higher demand for vaccines than the supply can keep up with. So far, there's been 254,936 doses administered in Fresno County. They're currently continuing working on the food, ag, education, and child care workers. And then they just added the individuals age 16 to 64 with specific medical conditions. And there's a very specific criteria that you have to have. And then they also added or determined, they didn't really add it to the list, they just determined that transit employees and certain utilities employees that are essential to the continuing functions of government are also on the eligibility list. So we're working with our employees that fall into those categories, trying to get them scheduled. And then the criteria, the eligibility criteria, it's a very fluid situation right now. There's new determinations as to who's eligible. There's somewhat inconsistent interpretations. So it's causing a lot of confusion. Our recommendation, my continued recommendation, is just to keep going to My Turn, the state web page, and there's a little questionnaire you fill out and tell them your age and what you do, and if you have certain health conditions, and they tell you, I just did it this afternoon. They're like, well, not quite yet, but we'll let you know when you can register, leave your email. We'll let you know when you are eligible, but I'm not eligible at this time. So, and yet there's other places I know that have, in the state, that have vaccinated people that didn't appear to be on the eligibility list. So it's a bit confusing. And then there's always the issue they have every day of if they have appointments and no-shows, and at the end of the day, they've got some vaccines left over that they were prepared to give, were thawed out, and now they have to give them or throw them away. So it's a challenge getting the vaccines out. There is reportedly plans to greatly increase the number of vaccine doses coming to the state here in the next week or two, as the existing vaccine manufacturers gear up and increase their production, and then as Johnson & Johnson comes online, hopefully we see a significant increase in the number of people vaccinated a week. So that's where we're at. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Luke? Seeing none, I'll open this to the public. Any member of the public in chambers wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none. We have anybody online?
No.
We received, the public comment we got initially addressed this, but didn't go in that comment. Did we have any other comments?
We did not.
Okay. We will move on to city manager comments. Luke?
I've got nothing else.
Bob? Jose? was part of 2 Zoom meetings, one last week, one today. The one last week was with Clovis Community College, and they talked about their vision for increasing their footprint with students and where they plan on being in a couple of years. They were very praiseworthy of our staff and how we work with them. We did discuss connecting people either through our transit or in cooperation with FACTS. I know that staff's working on that. Like I said earlier, the City of Fresno representative was very praiseworthy for Amy. Said that they work really well together, so that was good. And I told them that the audience that I see that really probably needs to be served even more is southwest portion of the city, a lot of apartment complexes, and Fresno Unified. So I kind of brought up the fact that they need to work with Fresno Unified also, in addition to Clovis Unified, to make sure that we're getting the young men and women that aren't Clovis Unified students to make sure they get some stuff. Also, Jose and I were on with the VA this morning, or at lunch. The VA is, they're going to be going for their funding again for the new medical center or for this clinic, but they also said that the existing facility is being looked at for its seismic limitations, and there is a potential that if the retrofit there would cost so much money, they may consider moving their entire facility here, and the Veterans Medical Center would be in Clovis, which I think would be awesome. But that's in the future. They do have some projects or some stuff with staff that staff's working on, but you know, being able to partner the VA Medical Center with every other medical entity out there and the medical education that we have, that would be pretty amazing. Other than that, I don't have anything else, and we will be in adjournment.